all empty. It's not my fault.
She was getting one from Mom.
Oh, sorry. All right, being 6 o'clock, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. First up is to approve minutes from 11/21/22. Need a motion?
Make a motion?
Second. Any changes, corrections, updates? Nope. All those in favor? All right. Citizen comments? A lot of citizens. I love it. No comments. All right, moving on. We're going to jump right into the presentation of school programs. I believe this is a 4th grade presentation.
4th, 5th, and 6th.
4th, 5th, and 6th. Are they all here and accounted for?
Yes.
I don't want to start unless you're...
No, welcome.
All right.
I was the last one. We might need to. They didn't plan it out sometimes. I didn't think we were going on the stage. I thought we were going to stay here, but they're great. They all think they're going on the stage. They're used to doing that from all school meetings. Yeah, I told her I would just put it up here so it's easy to see. Hi. Thanks for having us. And Jen, thanks for insisting that we come and show off what we're doing.
You're quite welcome.
So hey guys, come on up here. Just come all the way up. Walk towards me. That's what I mean by come up. There you go, up towards me. Good, right there, perfect. So we have a couple of 4th graders, a 5th grader, a 6th grader here to talk to you guys about our all the things we've been doing in the fall in our integrated block, which is really our social studies unit. And you'll see that in the social studies unit, we figured in just about every area except for science. And that doesn't mean we couldn't, it's just we're doing other stuff with science. We are going to, we have a little slideshow. They're going to tell you, we're going to show the slideshow. They're just going to give you guys some background information. And then, and they'll show you their pieces along the way. So, our social studies units rotate through a cycle of a couple of years. We've been messed up a couple of years. COVID kind of messed us up when we couldn't group 4, 5, and 6 together. Our cycle got a little bit mixed up. But traditionally in New Hampshire, 4th grade social studies curriculum is New Hampshire history. And so that's where we started this year with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders all working on New Hampshire history. So we start every unit, every integrated block unit with an essential question. There are a couple of them for New Hampshire, and tonight what we want to talk to you is the one that's called How Has New Hampshire Been Shaped by Many Voices? So it's kind of a study of the people who have been in New Hampshire kind of since the beginning of time. So we're going to tell you how we studied a little bit about the Abenaki. We started to learn about the colonists, and then we did some more modern history when the 4th graders were involved with the really spectacular ski museum. I don't know, what do you call it? Extravaganza?
That's what I was going
Yeah, all of schools in the valley, all of the 4th and 5th graders in the valley have been involved in this New Hampshire Ski Museum presentation, and it was just fabulous. And so our 4th graders got to be involved. So Cecilia's going to talk a little bit about that as well. So here we go. Get back to the beginning. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit excited, a little bit beside myself. I just picked my son up from the airport. I haven't seen him since August. So.
Good reason to use it.
Yeah. All right, so I know you guys won't be able to see all the words, but the pictures are all on that side of the thing, so bear with us. You should be able to see all of the pictures. So the early history of New Hampshire from the JGS 4, 5, and 6 in fall 2022. I already told you that. All right, Chico.
At the muster in the mountains, we learned about the Abenaki and early Europeans who settled in the New Hampshire and how they lived.
And there's Jacob himself talking to one of the reenactors at the muster in the mountains. Miss Porter, maybe he'll tell you guys something about that. Cecilia?
We learned in colonists. In addition to PE classes, students learn more Native American and colonial games, exploring how games may have originated and how they may have influenced games being played today. We will demonstrate one of those games in this quarter.
What's the name of this game? Cat and mouse. All right. So remember, we start at the end, and on the word go, you begin. 3, 2, 1, go. And Gregory, can you tell the what you're trying to do here?
So basically, it's kind of like tug of war, but you're trying to make the person fall off the slab right here. So that's basically the game. And some strategies are like waiting till the person is pulling it, and then when they stop, like yanking or something, that's a strategy.
So, there we go. They both have really good strategies, and people got up there with somebody that was putting a half collar in there. I can't do this, but it's not just about size. There's definite strategy involved. You want to try it? Yeah, we can totally count down. 3, 2, 1. You got to think about your stance.
Oh, you are so ready. Right. Right.
When we talked to the reenactors, we learned some figurative language, starting with things in their lives. Ramrod string is a saying that means as straight as possible. This comes from the rod that jammed the ball into the musket. Flashed in the pan is a saying that means something comes really quick, comes and goes really quick, and that comes from lighting the musket.
We visited the New Hampshire State House for an introduction to New Hampshire's government.
You can only see half of this picture. But they're in the New Hampshire Senate chambers, so they're sitting, and the docent let them sit in all of the senators' chairs and then talk to them about what the senators' roles were in different things. It was really kind of fun.
We visited the New Hampshire Historical Museum and saw Abenaki and colonial artifacts. We worked in groups to create slides and artifacts to teach people about the Abenaki and how they lived.
Those are our artifacts showing the different kinds of houses they lived in. Wigwams made by Jacob, longhouses made by Gregory, and hunting tents made by Kingston. And that model that we made is over there.
Yeah, their model is here.
We wrote paragraphs for the museum cards about our artifacts to share at all school meeting. Here is mine. Hunting tents were important when the Abenaki had to travel for hunting. They were made out of deer hide. They were easy to put up. The Abenaki could bring the tents anywhere they go. Hunting tents were unnecessarily shelter for their way of life.
We learned about area perimeter to plan for a life-size longhouse. Here's a poster showing them at work.
Each one of the students made a copy of their own. We kind of worked together. And along the way, before that, we have another poster that I didn't bring over that's a whole list of math vocabulary that we worked on and determined which math vocabulary would be useful to know when we're building something like that. And so they, as you can see, the formulas on the bottom, they have to figure out all the ways that they could use to figure out the area and the perimeter. And so you'll see in red where there's 24 plus 12 parentheses times 2. That's work that we did. We had them work together in groups to kind of brainstorm all the different ways you can solve those kind of problems, because most of them can't do 24 by 12 in their heads, because their teachers really can't do that in their heads very quickly. So we talked about all the different strategies that you can use, and they wrote them down on their own. And then they also had to then take the length and make even spacings to decide where we were going to put the saplings. The longhouse frame is out in the backfield. We haven't put the cover over it, mostly just because weather has gotten in the way every single time we've planned it. Weather or sickness has gotten in the way every single time we've planned it, but they made in art class with Mrs. Scribner a birch bark covering. So they took a tarp and looked at the patterns on birch bark and painted a big tarp to make it look like birch bark. And that will eventually get up there so the kids can do some buddy reading and that kind of stuff in their longhouse. All right, switching gears. Still thinking about that question, Voices Who Shape New Hampshire. When we were offered the opportunity to have this year at the New Hampshire Ski Museum, I talked to Suzanne McCarthy, who was our connection with that, and I said, we're doing this as our essential question for our New Hampshire history unit. And she said, that's great, let's talk about people. So we brainstormed a list of all different kinds of people who could impact New Hampshire through the ski industry. So we talked about Hannah Schneider and all of the early skiers. We talked about George Morton, who invented the ski mobile. We talked about early property owners, and we talked about different groups, Ski Patrol and ESSC, and history about all of those people. Sabine did her great-grandfather, J. Arthur Doucette, and it was beautiful. And so Cecilia chose Carol Reed, and so I'll just hold up her diorama and let her read a little bit about it.
I chose to study Carol Reed. I thought it was interesting that he taught people how to ski vintage Hyatt Policeman. He ran a Saks Fifth Avenue store and then decided that he could have his own clothing as nice as those. People from Boston who came up on the ski train loved these clothes. Here's my diorama of the Carol Reed ski.
You know, she spent some time finding pictures of vintage Carol Reed jackets that are not the 1980-something vintage Carol Reed sweater that I'm wearing, but and then put her facts all the way around it. So when we presented this at the ski museum, people really could learn a little bit about Carol Reed and that it was, an actual person. The projects all came out fabulous. Everybody did different projects. I said Sabine did her great-grandfather, so she had some personal things. One student chose Leanne Smith, an Olympian, local Olympian, as her person, and actually emailed Leanne and got some answers back, some questions. So there was a personal component in that too. So when we do integrated projects, we reach out to everybody in the community who might have a possible connection to help us with things. Mrs. Porter found a muster in the mountains, and that just kind of got us going, thinking about early New Hampshire history. Every year, or every time we come around to a topic in social studies, we don't want it to feel like we're doing the same old thing, but we want kids to be able to personalize it and get the very most out of it in a way that is project-based and inclusive of all things, so we included art and PE, and we did math, and we did writing, and there was a ton of reading when we did research about the Abenaki. So we tie in every different subject area that we can, and then at the end come out with a project. And then the ski museum was just a little mini project. It was, here's what we have to make something that we're going to present to the public, and here's the question that you're answering, and find some information about that person, and so that's how we do it. Questions for these guys or me? Or Mrs. Portis?
Was there a certain topic that you liked over another?
I liked how, in the Abenakis, how, they would, their, how would you, ritual, how they would, how if they chopped down a tree, they would use all of it, and they would, because they believed everything had a spirit, so they would, say thank you, basically, to the tree that gave us life. So I think that was interesting and very cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Cecilia, what was your topic when you guys did home? What was your topic for your artifact? What did you make?
I made a birch bark sack bucket.
Yeah, so you made a birch bark sack bucket, which was really cool. So that was about using resources, natural resources, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just wanted to add, so Mustering the Mountains, I went probably 8 or 10 years ago with my son, and he just loved it, just immersed in how they dress, what tents they use, the bartering system. There's a tinsmith who barters to get blankets, and it all works together. And so this year finally came together to go, and I've taught colonial and Native American games before, but having them have that experience of seeing it happen and hearing how some of the games arrived and using a softball, it's the closest thing we could find for a round piece of wood, to play kickball. And kickball is not around a baseball field. It's from one village to another. So really getting in their head that a lot of the games originated from the need of work or training for the warriors. And at the end of the unit, a lot of them were like, keep doing it. They were so invested. And so I'm really, really happy that we able to do it this year.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys so much. I know it's, Thank you guys. You're welcome to stay. All right. Good luck with that. Nice to see you. Good job, guys. Thanks for coming. Have a Merry Christmas.
All work together.
It's like one person in the group. There are 3 people in the group, and then one person is in
Trying to get to one.
It was you.
All right. Old business. You guys ready to move on? Instructional issues? Accept the retirement of Melissa Grady as paraprofessional.
Motion to accept regret retirement of retirement of Melissa Grady as paraprofessional.
Second. All those in favor with regret?
No.
You're not.
No, he doesn't approve it.
Sorry, can't retire. Oh well.
I didn't know how to go with that.
Election of ski program coordinators.
There's a correction. The stipend should be $750.
Thank you, yeah.
Good news for those.
Neil Stokes and
Mike Duflo.
So, motion to election of ski program coordinators. Mike.
Second. All those in favor? Thank you. Consider approval of principal job description. Motion.
I got some things to say. The only real thing was, I didn't really, and correct me if it's in there, I didn't see it. I didn't really see where it talks about that they're also responsible for the liaison between the middle school and high school. I mean, I would think that, they
Goes with
know
the
that that's
job.
what they get into, that they're not just handling elementary schools.
Yeah, that typically happens as part of the responsibility.
Right.
But we get some candidates who are not from the smaller districts, they might not get that.
Well, it'll be explained to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just think it should be actually in the job description. Dale, did you know when you took the job that that was part of your duties?
Part of the job then.
Yes, and it was before we had a liaison as well. Now we've hired another liaison, but I went to all the IEP
But
meetings.
you
at the high
knew
school
about it,
before.
when, in the process, when did you know that was
I'm
going
not sure it was right in my job description, but it became apparent after a bit that I needed to
After the fact.
represent some families and the other schools.
to be?
Yeah. It was apparent that I needed to work closely with Bartlett because we were preparing our students for transitioning,
Yeah.
not as much the high school.
I don't think it hurts to simply have that in there.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I mean, let's put it all on the table so people know what they're getting into.
Okay, so we approve
With
with,
conditional approval,
yeah, with the change.
As amended.
As amended, yeah. All those in favor? Who, you make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second and then,
Thank you.
you're welcome, sorry about that. All right, consider increase of stipend for recording secretary.
Motion to increase that stipend for the recording secretary.
Second?
All those in favor? 22-23 budget status report.
Yeah, if I could just point out a few things, it is in your packet, that's the new budget, but you folks are, at this point in the year, you know, it's getting tighter and tighter. There were some unanticipated pieces that you have in the budget, so I would just be very cautious about expending monies or creating other opportunities to spend money in this budget that haven't been earmarked for. I don't know, Gail, you have anything else? And there may be a need to go into the special education trust fund at some point. We'll keep an eye on that. But there were some unanticipated costs that have occurred this year.
No, that's what they're for. Okay.
Because at the rate that we're needing to expend just for regular school supplies and personnel and substitutes and just the daily operation of the building, we're getting pretty close to needing. We've been pulling some of the unanticipated special ed money out of the regular budget. We have to move it in order to expend it, so.
Right, well, that makes sense.
We'll need to start looking at that.
Yep.
And it might even, I'm going to start kind of limiting expenses that aren't absolutely necessary, because I feel like we're gonna need to be prudent about that.
So based on this year's moving target per se, you know, the additional spending, we're keeping track of it so that we can budget correctly for next year's.
You'll see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just, you know.
Yes, no, we did anticipate, like, one of the areas was that after-school program, we're budgeting now for the full recommendation of the 4 days a week, and we're budgeting for new positions and reading specialists that you won't have when I'm gone, and a number of other things that have caused that budget to be up. Kevin will go over that with you as well, but.
Thank you. Which brings us to the 23-24 budget.
There are copies of the budget, if people, I put them on the chair, they're up here. So the proposed budget, thank you, Ms. Hyatt, for moving those. They're up there. Help yourself.
Pretty sure my kids moved them, not me.
I'll explain this to us.
So what you have is the cover sheet that kind of gives you a summary of the different accounts. And you can take a look back, a 2-3 year look back. The biggest increase to your budget is in salaries and compensation benefits. So in this kind of gets to our previous discussion about our current budget. There are some hires and some other positions that were increased that weren't necessarily budgeted right away. So you'll see that, you know, the salaries are up pretty significantly, about 156,000, and with that goes your FICA, your teacher retirement, health insurance came in at 9.9%, so that is part of the increase to the budget as well. So then you kind of work your way down, and I'll go into a little bit more detail as we move through the page, but tuition in middle high school is up about $90,000. So we can talk more in depth about that. But overall, your budget, this first draft here is up about 12%. So it's a pretty, steep number to take a look at. If you flip to page 1, I'm not going to go through line by line, but what I try to do is just kind of pick in different pieces that kind of stood out when we went through. So obviously you have, the 20% art position, 40% music, 20% PE salaries. That includes, as Gail said, a 0.4 reading teacher as well. So that is in the budget. There were some changes to the foreign language. You have a certified teacher, so that saw a bump up in that to the salary end of things. Just kind of working down. And if you have questions on the left-hand side, there are actually numbers to those lines, so you can kind of point out one of those. Everything else is relatively static, working your way down on that first page. But that is, that's all your staffing, and you can see some of those increases.
There's an additional full-time para as well.
Yep, paraprofessional as well.
Special education para.
I think that will come on the next page in the special ed.
Oh, is it?
Yep. It's okay though, Gail.
Okay. Well, I saw special.
On page 2, page 2, you will see the tuition at the middle school goes down. There's a decrease of students there, and it goes up at the high school because you have a few more students there. So again, that is not just a per pupil cost, it's based upon your equalized valuation and your average daily membership. So I do have a sheet here I can give you if you want. You can take a look at the historical trends of what your equalized valuation is and what your ADM has been over the past 6 or 7 years.
And Kevin, just to clarify, those ADM, equalized valuation, that's for the high school tuition.
That's correct.
For Barlow, we pay just, that's right, per person, per student cost. And if people are tracking the population for Barlow, we pay what we're predicting to have there next year. And for Conway, for the high school, we pay after the fact. So it's the actual numbers from the high school versus the predicted numbers for Bartlett. So if you're thinking that, well, we know 11 students just left the middle school, well, that's not reflected in this. Well, it's because we're compensating, it was already paid for Bartlett, but hasn't been paid for high school yet. So they'll be out of sync. In other words, what the actual population is in the middle school and the high school isn't reflected in the budget in the exact same way, I guess. Does that make sense?
Then you work your way down lines 50 through about 70 are just your general supplies, books, no real big changes there. If you get down to line 71, that's for technology, computers, interactive whiteboard.
Right, our smart boards, interactive whiteboards are 10 years old, and so it's time to start replacing them. And this isn't to replace all of them, this is planning on at least one each year as we go forward. And then there are also some, just to keep our iPads and laptops current. Good.
So then if you go down to lines 76, that's where you'll see some special education costs in that next block, including new line for salaries as well as health insurance. Are there any questions on page 2? Page 3.
Wait, so line 76?
Yeah.
That's the anticipated salary for a full-time?
That's actually ES, full-time paraprofessional, 1-to-1. And it's actually being expended this year, right? You have somebody in that position?
We do.
Yeah. So that wasn't in your budget last year, that's why I'm saying, that budget that you currently have when you start drawing from that for
Sure.
services. And what Pam Stimson and Gail do is they budget for services that they know about right now. They don't anticipate, they put in what the actual services are. So on page 3, working your way down, you'll see the big one is line 92, again, some special education costs that, and you're, again, using those this year as well. So those weren't in the budget, so it's budgeted for next year. So you can see that special education costs have gone up. ESOL, that's your English as second or other language, not a whole lot of change, it's just a little bit of increase for services. And then you will see down at the bottom, the co-curricular, summer programming, and there really is no significant change there. Page 4, unless you have questions, feel free to stop. After school programming, that's increased from, it was budgeted at 6 to 8 hours to, I think, 14 to 15, 16 hours for next year. And that comes with additional costs. Your guidance counseling services, no real change in the services there. Health services, if you go down to 131 to 132, you used to contract those services through Bartlett, and now you hire somebody, and that is the expected cost for that position. And the rest of those pages, psychological services, speech services, again, those are driven by IEPs, physical and occupational therapy as well. So you see some increases there. The next block, from 140 to 160, this is where, again, we're trying this again, the library media specialist and the technology position combined together to create one position. And the intent was to combine that, you better quality or better chance of filling the position than having part-time positions here and there.
And while we're here, let's just emphasize why that needs to happen versus like sharing from Bartlett, right? Like
They're not sharing in
They are sharing.
So I just think it's important to state that while we're like in a public session, to be like,
Yep.
this is not a pie in the sky situation. This is because it's untenable in the current iteration, and we need to have this out, the money to be able to hire this to be in guidelines, right?
So this was an issue
Yep.
at last year's annual district
Absolutely.
meeting.
Yep.
And I think I would reframe it as, it's not why it needs to happen.
Yep.
It doesn't, nothing needs to happen.
Okay.
It's, you know, we were asked to be creative at the annual district meeting last year. We were asked to share with Bartlett at the annual district meeting last year. And, well, we exhausted the work with Bartlett when it came to that position. And we were very adamant with Gail, and Gail was adamant with us that sharing with Bartlett is still the ideal, and we will still do that if we possibly can.
Yeah.
The idea of combining the tech coordinator with the library media specialist, you know, the other criticism we came up with was that, well, you'll never find someone to do that. And it's very possible that we will never find someone to do that. This gives us the option if the opportunity does arise. And without having this in the budget, if the opportunity for that position did arise, and that would, then we would be able to do it. Because we do need to get creative in how we fill the positions that are lacking in the school. And I feel, and I think the board assumes that this is our way of being creative to get that position.
Yep.
It's no guarantee that we'll get the position. We realize that might not be achievable, but without the money in the budget to cover that position as a full-time position for that, we would never be able to do it. And so that's why it's in there. If we can find a part-time position for a library media specialist, or we can find a part-time person for the tech coordinator position, we would still take that opportunity to do that. That would still be the intent. That would be the first choice, is to fill both of those positions part-time. This is just another way of being creative to be able to do it if the opportunity arises.
Awesome.
And both of those positions are required under state law to
Thank you.
be part of the elementary school.
And so what does that mean in reality is that, well, that jeopardizes our accreditation. And I'm sure that we could go year after year after year where that's not going to be a huge problem for accreditation. But if we're not making an attempt to fill that position to the best that we can, then it does become a problem. So if we're doing everything that we can to do that, to get that position filled, then the state will probably look at that and be like, okay, they're doing everything they can, circumstances as they are. This is a problem across the entire country. Filling positions like these, we're doing what we can. So.
Great, thanks.
And on top of it, it's not just checking off boxes. I think Gail did a great job at the last annual district meeting explaining the importance of both of those positions. Those are two very integral parts of educating children these days. And it's not just checking off a box that the state's happy. These are things that actually have an impact on our children. It helps our staff. It's a good thing to have. So.
We'll have the same conversation at the next meeting.
Again and again. I think, like, what we talked about, right? Like, we have to bring, you know, like, we might feel like we're in this conversation, but unless we always are thinking that there are people in this room who are ultimately going to have the voting power, we have to keep, like, not glossing over it and saying, here's the reason why, because then we're not going to get back up against what's happening.
Correct, that's why we're having a meeting.
Yep, and we'll frequently ask questions.
It's on tape.
Details.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay,
One question on that section. Are we done with that section?
wherever you want to go.
I would just want to know what the thought process was on throwing the $5,000 into the contract services technology. They were already increasing by 50-some-odd thousand on the other lines.
So you're referring to line
158.
158, yeah. So in addition, you probably want to have some monies in there for issues that are beyond your technology person. We're talking bigger issues, right?
Like the server breaks down.
Right.
Somebody hacks
The actual
You got it.
repair of
Yeah.
the equipment is where the contracted service would come in. The digital person is more about teaching the children how to use the technology and supporting the staff with the use of technology and keeping us current. They would write the technology plan that we implement, but when the actual hardware breaks, we need somebody with a little different expertise.
All right, so then you get the Ed Media Services, you can see that $11,000 that was in the budget in 161 gets transferred up into, so that's why that's a decrease. If you can't find anybody, you're probably gonna have to shift money from up above down to that line. School board services, no big raises for you folks. Going on, flip to page 6. These are all pretty standard legal professional services, auditing, clerk. And then you get to the bottom, lines 172. That's your hiring incentives. And then you'll see that's the biggest change there. Insurance went up a little bit. SEU office actually went down. The principal, that's not Gail, that's our anticipated new principal. And then you'll see some adjustments to the other salaries, page 7. Health insurance and benefits related to that. No other significant changes. So that's that. And then you go to 205 down to 234. Just some changes back and forth, minor anticipated. The big thing you'll see is heating fuel costs. We haven't locked in on that yet. That's line 222, budgeting $4.50 a gallon. We'll see where that comes in. Last year's $2.50 a gallon.
Crazy.
Flip to page 8 unless you have questions. You can see that contracted services is down a little bit. But when we get to warrant articles, there'll be a conversation about playground and whether that goes on the warrant or not. Transportation, again, you'll see fuel costs and 241 jumping up a little bit. Field trips, minor adjustment there. Transportation for summer programming, just to make sure that should you not be able to do full summertime program here, you may have to transport some students. Page 9, and you'll see there's an early retirement that you had, so that it's budgeted as well. And other than that, that should give you your whole budget. So let's see, $3,082,605 right now, as we speak. And then you'll see some grant expenditures and proposed budgets, but those can change. So I don't know if you have any specific questions on the budget itself, or if there's a direction. In January, that's when you will adopt a budget number and figure out what you want on the warrants, and then it will go to a public hearing in February. Okay, so there's time between now and the January meeting. Even after the January meeting, you can make some changes at that meeting. So this is kind of the first run through on your budget.
Thank you.
We should probably go through the warrant articles. And the warrant articles are, so article number 1 would be your operating budget. So when you do get a number, you'll go to hearing and place that on there. So you have to have that there. Article 2 is your special education trust fund. So currently you have $210,000 in there. So that would be something to keep an eye on, and Pam could give you a better recommendation. She'd probably say about $250 for.
I think that's what she did.
Yeah.
Say.
I wasn't just dreaming that.
No, you were not. No.
Actually paid attention to that. All right, so that we'll leave that on there. Article 3, your school bus fund. You have $138,000 in there. So.
When's the next bus due?
I'm sorry?
When is the next bus?
I don't have that. off the top of my
We
head.
just gave the bus,
That seems kind of high, it must be coming up.
was 2 years ago.
But where's the rotation? I can check on
I
that.
think we do every 3 years.
We talked about it at the
Yeah.
budget meeting.
Do we go to 4 years or are we still at 3?
We're still 3. Yeah.
On the bus, 130. I mean, Article 3.
Yes, that's what I had.
The other thing we need to do with Article 3 is we need to, at some point, have a conversation with the trustees of the trust fund, because the last time we bought a bus, they mistakenly told us that we couldn't use the trust fund money before we used the appropriations from that year. And I think we just need to have a conversation with them so that we're on the same page there. Because the last time we bought a bus, we tried to use all of the trust fund for it, the capital reserve for it, is it the capital reserve or trust fund? The capital reserve for it. And they told us that we could only, that because we had appropriated $25,000, that we had to use all of that money, and we couldn't use the balance from the trust fund, the capital reserve fund. We actually can. So we just need to have a conversation with them so they understand that next time we go to buy the bus, it's at our discretion how much of the capital reserve fund that we use. That's for the purpose of buying the bus. We can use as much of that as
Because we gotta do the rest of the budget.
And the reason why we do that is because we try to manage the tax rate. In other words, we don't keep the money in the capital reserve fund so that we can earn interest on it and income off that. That's a silly thing to do. The whole purpose of it is to be able to manage the tax rate properly, which isn't something that the trust fund, management of the trust fund people do. They just guard the trust fund to make sure the money is being spent on what it's there for. So we want to spend X amount of dollars from that fund. That's up to us, not them. We just need to have a conversation with them so that next time we buy a bus, it doesn't happen again. That's all.
And we still have another 90,000-ish.
So usually we anticipate it being between $85,000 and $90,000. I'm sure they've probably gone up a little bit since then. But whatever we anticipate the purchase to be is usually like $10,000 less than that,
Yeah.
which is why there's often some miscalculation between what we appropriate and what's in our capital reserve fund for it. That's what happened last time. It cost us $10,000 less, and they tried to say that we had to spend all of it from appropriations, and we don't. So that's where that comes in. So, but yeah, it's right around the $85,000 mark.
And if it's not this year, or it'll be next year. It'll be there.
Right, so when you could just take that off if you want, you know.
I would recommend that we've got some.
So let's figure out where we are. It's like,
Okay.
Yeah.
what the capital reserve fund looks like, and
Yeah.
then we'll decide whether we need to add any money to it or not. If we don't need to add money to it, we won't.
Article 4 is the Whitney Maintenance Trust Fund, and that's the one you put $3,000 in every year. You have about $52,000 in that account. Article 5 is the Tuition Trust Fund. So you have about $108,000 in that right now. And that covers more the middle school if you get a big jump there.
How much is in there?
108.
Do we have another fund for building maintenance?
Yeah, you do. I didn't put anything on there. You have 91,400 in there. If you would like to put one on there, you could. But at this point,
So Keith, last year, we had some conversation about that anyway, to determine what's the maximum amount we need in that. So what we wanted to do is kind of, if the heater, the boiler breaks down here or breaks down in the school, what's the most we're going to get impacted for in 1 year? And we feel that we're already above that number in there, so we don't need to put more money in there. And that.
And I don't know where you went, but before I left on the board, we talked about keeping the Whitneys at a minimum and making sure we have plenty of the other one, because the other one, we can use them both, but Whitneys, we can only use the Whitneys.
Correct, yeah.
I'm just curious how we got to 52,000, and we only put 3,000 in a year.
and then there was discussion at the budget meeting about the purchase and installation of playground equipment. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, but it's really up to you folks to determine whether that's something you want to put on there, how much.
Our equipment has really reached the end of its useful life many years ago, actually. But with the proposal we were putting forth for the addition, we thought we would need to move it anyway, so we would wait until we knew where the addition was going to go, and then at that point put it in. It doesn't look like we'll be moving forward anytime really soon with that addition, but the equipment itself is getting pinch points in it, and it really needs to be replaced.
Is there any quote on pricing on
We
things?
don't have a specific quote. They go anywhere from like 20 to 25,000 to you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. But
It'd be nice to have a quote.
I would recommend we hold off on that. Our budget's already going to be up 12%.
So that was, we did have a conversation about that at the budget committee meeting, Keith, and it's, the board does need to decide this as a whole. It's why it's like, let's bump that conversation to the full board so we can have a conversation about it. And we do need to have that conversation in the scope of the addition to the school too, because we haven't decided as a board yet where we're going with that. We do have estimates for all of these things segmented out, like storage space for the school, addition to the school, including the preschool, and then playground separated out from that as well. So those are all the things that are on our table, if you will. It's going to be up to us to decide what we actually do. And I was in the camp of view of we're already increases are too much as they are, and those are a needs-based increase, they're not a wants-based increase. So can we really afford to do the playground or not? And it's that playground out there, I put it in. By that I mean, it's not that I was on the board then, it's that you and I physically
we dug
put the playground in,
Yeah.
dug the holes, mixed the concrete, and that was a long time ago. The swing set that's out there
Yeah.
was the swing set that was used when I was in first grade here. So it's been here a very, very long time. Because I'm old. So
What's the plan right now with the addition? I mean, I heard what Gail said, which it doesn't seem like it's gonna happen anytime soon. I need an update on what that's looking like inside of this concert, like you just laid out, like this is part of the ecosystem,
So the reason why she stated it that way is because the board hasn't decided what we're
Yeah,
going to do with it.
no.
So I mean, in the beginning of this year, our plan was to put
Absolutely.
it in there. So I mean,
Yeah.
if we intend to do that, we need to do that. But that's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Is do we intend to still do that? Do we want to add an additional $150,000 a year to the budget and do the whole thing? Or do we piecemeal it out, or do we put the whole thing on the table for now?
Yeah.
And I guess the position that I'm arguing for is that we put the addition to the side for now. And the reason I like the playground discussion is because there can be a community push for the playground, being like, let's raise funds independently of the school budget and get the playground built, which would be ideal and would be nice. And that's, playground's the kind of thing that just, it's not that hard to go out and appropriate, raise money in the community for a playground. It's something that the community would usually support. And we can still do that. But if we put money in the budget for it and we do a big push to get the playground replaced, and the community effort to appropriate money, to raise money through the community falls short, we would still be able to do it. And
Yeah, I just think that if we're looking at down the road at still doing an addition, I mean, it begs the question for me, are we doing a playground and are we siting it in a place that accommodates an addition, that accommodates like the other infrastructure changes that have to happen to the school, so that we're not like putting money in and then moving a playground down the road, which we can plan for. I just think we need to be answering those questions. And it comes back for me, like, I know that the move was after last year was to bring in this new like townwide facilities committee. So maybe get Jen, something you can speak to, like what is the temperature right now on, like how far out is it in the overall town facilities meetings about what's going to happen, what's a potential with the school.
So we just completed the survey, and we'll get to that when we get to the updates, but we're gonna do a listening post in January.
Yep.
It did come up from the community that they would be willing to support
Yep.
a school. It's not the highest of the top 3 that are on there for services and needs in the community, but it is on the radar for people, so I think we're getting to the time to circle back around and look at it again, put it out there, like how outdated is the building, breaking down, re-educating the community on the needs of it. But I think that the playground is too outdated to wait.
Yep. I agree that I just think we have to have a plan
Right.
for like, it just makes no sense to put a new playground and to spend a minimum of 25 / more and to get all the community to then say, and then people be like, well, we put the playground there so we can't do an addition. Like, it's gonna backfire with something, right?
You can move
We can actually move to
that's-
that playground.
Yeah.
Was in the.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, it's not cost prohibitive to move the playground because it's equipment
Yeah.
and such, so.
Jerry and I didn't charge anything last year.
Right. So I would say moving forward with the playground will not
Yeah.
prohibit revisiting the building.
Yeah.
And I do think we were smart to wait until the need survey was out, and it'll be presented to the selectmen and to the community next month.
The select board's gonna hear about it.
January 14th is a listening post for the community at large, and then the selectmen hearing on the 24th.
Yep.
And then we'll see what they want to do moving forward, because it really is the basic foundation for a town plan.
Yep.
Where we want to go.
Yeah, that's helpful for that context. I mean, I from a standpoint of use, yes, absolutely, we need a new playground. I mean, that was the last meeting that happened, right? Yale that we sat at right before the school shut down with COVID. It was like, let's have a committee to talk about what the playground upgrade, and then everything blew apart in the world. So, I mean, that'll be 3 years ago now.
And it's a good thing you brought that up about the playground and not having to move it, because, so that might not be cost prohibitive, there's no reason to do it in the first place, and it doesn't make sense. So,
Yeah.
In that context, of the expansion of the school,
Yeah.
that's been given to the folks that would be doing the playground plan.
Great.
So hopefully they'd be able to integrate that together so that it doesn't overlap and that there won't be conflict there. That should certainly happen, but so that aspect I think will be okay. That's the easy side. The difficult side for us is going to determine what, if any, of the school expansion do we consider for this year. And that has been broken down, I think, into 3 different basic things before, those, which from a facility standpoint, I'm on the facility committee, we would recommend that would be the first main target. In other words, if we're gonna do it in phases, let's handle the storage side of the issue first.
Are we talking like a shed or the climate controlled storage facility?
I'm not entirely sure, but I believe it actually entails things like putting in a man lift inside the building, switching some office space around. So not just outside the building, but actually doing things inside the building. It did include some expansion of the building too, that would address just the storage needs. And then there's one that also addresses the classroom needs, expanding the classroom, one of the classrooms in the old section of the building, and then converting the other half to offices, and then taking what's offices now and expanding it into a larger classroom so that we would have 4 small, modern-sized classrooms.
So, Jerry, is there a sense of, because I don't have anything in front of me right now, so I'm just trying to follow this in a theoretical space. If we do this phase versus if we do this all together, what's the efficiency loss financially, right? Because there's got to be one.
In this situation, there's probably none. In fact, it would make more sense to do it in a phased way than it would be to do it in, because let's say we wanted to do everything. It would probably take 3 to 4 years to pull it off. In other words, to actually make it happen. So it would be done in phases anyway. So efficiency loss is probably going to be none, because there's not a whole lot to do with most of these things. The expansion of the footprint doesn't impact things like where the power comes from, where the septic is, and those kind of things. So there's not going to be a large efficiency loss by segmenting it into different phases.
And cost increase by segmenting it, by getting crews in different spaces?
So there's another
Putting up a
thing.
wall
So
that
we
is taken down.
didn't do it last year. We did it this year, and this is where things they get complicated. No one can predict the future. It's an intelligent question.
Yeah.
But because of the scope and nature of our situation, there's probably very little efficiency loss by segmenting it. But again, you can't predict it. But for instance, if you built this year as opposed to last year, it would be cheaper. Except for the fact that now it costs more to borrow money. And you factor those two things together, and you'd probably be spending a little bit less this year than last year, but not by much. Next year, interest rates continue to go up, which the Feds are saying they are. We're probably going to be behind the curve again as far as how much money did we lose by not doing it when last year versus next year or the following year. And
So what's the storage cost plus the playground?
I don't know.
We don't have any cost for the playground.
We have those numbers, it's just.
Well, Jerry said we did.
Do we have cost for the playground?
Yeah, the contractor that did the plan gave us some itemized listing. One thing I was going to inform you in my principal's report, we have just won a grant of $83,000 from the New Hampshire Emergency Management, Homeland Security, to build that vestibule that we had drawn in the front, so that you can kind of they call it hardening the front entrance. So that part of the plan can and will be done anyway. So that, he's got it. About $8,000 was the estimate for that.
Yeah.
So John Stokey wrote
For the vestibule.
For just the,
Security vestibule.
Right,
So that's not the
but that was on the
playground.
original plan.
It was part of the
He
expansion.
was- No, we did not have an estimate for the playground.
And the benefits of that is because you can lock someone in there if you need to.
So that when you walk through our front doors, you know you're right in front of the K1 door.
Yeah.
So now if someone walks in, they'll be held inside, there'll be still another door to go through. They'll check into the office, so as you walk in, the office will be on the right, there'll be a window there for Susan or a receptionist to greet you, and then check your credentials, whatever, and let you in or not. So you don't get to walk right into the hallway where there are students or upperclassmen. It includes some other things, surveillance camera, microphone,
I
and
think
some
years ago when we talked about this too, it was so you could lock people in there.
now you could
Like
never,
if an intruder came in, you lock the door.
you can't do that.
You have to
Be a
have
nice
those
thought.
breaker bars for fire security to be able to get out.
You get out there.
Yeah.
So we don't
What did you
have,
hear with that?
we don't have an estimate for the playground.
No, am I clear on that, right?
So, can
So
I ask
my
one more
thought
question?
is, wait, Keith, hold on, sorry. My thought is, I think we should move, you know, to refresh ourselves with the plan of, you know, if we want to move forward with doing any part of putting an addition onto the budget on the warrant article or anything. Because it's been a couple of years for me and for others, so that when I go to the community, I know what I'm talking about.
I mean, in terms of the playground.
The
And
whole
then
thing.
the second question is we want to do a segmented
Like,
addition.
if we're gonna do the addition or we're gonna tackle that in any fashion, I think we need to, as a group, either have a work session or plan for the next meeting to really get into it
Yeah.
and dissect it a little bit further. And I don't know if we're prepared for that this evening. I don't have the plans here, those types of things, so I think it would behoove us to really, you know,
Do it
refresh
right,
ourselves,
yeah.
do it right.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't wanna do it willy-nilly. I would like to get a quote for what we want for the playground so that we can decide if it's 80,000 or 25,000, what do we put on the warrant article, what do we fundraise, what are our expectations? So I need a number in order to figure
So-
what to do at all.
So we've been bouncing around numbers and we've been talking about it, but it's,
No playground.
well, right, but it's, what I'm driving at, Jen, is
Yes, sir.
the playground's been tough from the start because it's been, we've always put kind of on the back burner the fact that it wants to be, let's do the playground by having a community fundraiser for it and that alone. So how much do you raise for that? So that depends on what do you get. So the playground can be anywhere from $15,000 to $200,000. It can be anything. It's what do we want to spend for it. So it'd be really hard for, unless we give parameters on what we want the playground to be.
So that's what I'm kind of
It'll be
looking
really
for.
hard.
What-
Yeah.
So we could ask, we could just say to Gail or Kevin, hey, figure out what a playground's gonna cost. Well, they need more information than that. They need a
Okay,
lot more
so-
information than
I
that.
think Bartlett put in $25,000 approximately for the smaller playground.
And that's what I was gonna get to, is that I think that, you know, a number that would be safe would be between $25,000 and $30,000 for a playground that would get us a long ways. And still allow for us to do community funding in that aspect of it.
I guess I just don't know,
I still have a couple.
what, I want to know, like, what does 25 buy us, so that like, what would you want for a playground? Because I know there's a playground committee, right? So what would
We
you
don't really have a playground
want?
committee anymore.
But I mean, what
Yeah.
is the idea? So I just need, like, I get what you're saying, and I agree with you, but I just need to know, like, what are we
Yeah.
starting with?
Well, I know Kristen and Victoria have met with Heather Barrett, who is a landscape designer.
Yeah.
And she has been drawing up a plan for just a few pieces of equipment geared at handicap accessibility, because not all children can use the
Right.
equipment in the same way, and they wanted to be sure there were at least a few pieces. Like, you can buy separate pieces for $5,000 or $6,000, a little rocking horse thing or a little swing or something like
Right.
that. So they were looking at that. So I'm sure she can help us draft something quickly. I mean, basically, you want something there can hang on, you want some more swings and a climbing apparatus or something for some make-believe play.
Right. So that's what I would be looking for. It's
Yeah.
like, what are we, I have no idea.
Because
Right,
we have
I've
all these
never-
catalogs and you can see, wow, look at that, and then you'll need footing, you know, something rubber on the bottom, special rubber mulch or a rubber pad for safety.
Right. And then if we have, you know, what are our minimum expectations for a playground? And then we can go from there, say, what is the basic cost? And it's like, okay, do we put it on the warrant, do we do a 50-50 with the community, or do we do all fundraiser? But you know, when somebody comes up to me and says, well, what kind of playground is it? They're gonna be like, oh, for 30,000, we're getting a Taj Mahal. Well, actually, no, we're not. We're getting a couple swings and, you know, I just need to, I have no
So I got a
frame
couple questions.
of reference.
On the way that Article 6 is written, if we put a number in there, are we required to spend it by the end of the next school year?
No.
The money that goes in there? Or can we
They
carry
have
it?
to raise and appropriate it. They've raised and appropriated.
So we don't have to spend it by the end of the school year?
No, you don't have to. It just goes back.
So here's a thought, like you just mentioned, and this is where I was kind of going with this. Let's say we can get $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 from the community. What if we just slightly reword that article where it says, for the purpose of the purchasing and installation of playground equipment, why don't we put for the purpose of repairing and/or purchasing and installation of playground equipment, and throw like a 10 grand in there? And then
I'd rather find out the number. We got time.
You get time.
I'm not talking about right now, for 10 grand. I'm talking about in general, like, knowing that carry it over, and if we think it's gonna be a lower number, let's go really low on it, because then if it doesn't happen this year, we can do it the next year. We don't raise enough money from the community, we don't have to spend the money.
No, I wanna see what we're gonna get for quote before we go forward. I mean, it just makes sense. We have time to do it.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just saying in general for our process there, instead of asking for the whole money or 50%, knowing that we can carry it over.
Oh, you can't carry it from year to year?
Oh, that's what I asked.
Oh,
You
no,
guys
sorry,
said yes.
I misunderstood.
Oh, okay.
I thought you said if
Forget all that.
you have $20,000 on there,
Then
you
forget all
have to spend all $20,000. No,
No.
you can spend $10,000, but by June of
So we have to spend
24,
the,
it goes back to the taxpayers.
Right, so there's a couple of ways we can tackle that from a budgeting standpoint. This is just out for the playground. We could create a capital reserve fund for it, in which case then it wouldn't have to be spent inside of that 1 year. So we could do it that way. If we were keeping the language here, the only thing I would like to see change is if we see the purpose of purchasing, design purchasing, I would throw in the word design. Because, like, Jen, I hear you where you're saying it would be nice to know a number. Some of these numbers, we're gonna need to get engineering done for. In other words, you need X amount of mulch, X amount of rubber chips, 18 inches deep, 400 cubic yards. How much does that cost? How does it go in? So I mean, we're gonna need like actual professional things. So it's like, how deep down that rabbit hole do we want to go? And if we're starting that right now for getting passed in March,
We're a little behind the curve.
we're behind the curve.
Yeah. So, but you said you could probably get a cost together quickly, right? For the playground?
An estimate.
An estimate, yeah.
Not necessarily a quote, but an
I
estimate.
mean, at least gives me something.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing that we need to have that for the playground, and we also need to have a conversation from a facility standpoint about the, like, general addition, that we're segmenting it so that we can all be brought up to speed. Because Jerry, I heard you
Yeah,
say,
it's
like,
just
do we want to?
Picking one thing.
No, definitely, but I was trying to, I agree, I was like, sorry, taking us to the next step, which is like, so what we're looking for is for the next
Finish
meeting.
this step.
Okay, go right ahead.
So for the playground, I think if we can get a figure by the next meeting, then we can make, have a more intelligent conversation about how we want to calculate. Even if it's off by,
And that's fine. I would recommend that we make that a part of the work session that we have regarding the overall facilities. And that's what I'm trying to drive to, is that, is what does the board want to do as a whole? I mean, I've got ideas in my head, and we've got the numbers with the facility living costs are pretty high estimates on what the cost could actually be. But the playground throws in a pretty big monkey wrench, because you can find out how much a swing set costs or how much a slide costs, but that means nothing about how do you actually get it in the ground. And that's when we, like, if that's the detail that we want on that versus creating a placeholder for it is a whole different story. If we want to create a placeholder, as Keith is suggesting, so that we can appropriate this over a couple of years, I would recommend that we, at this point in time, create a capital reserve fund for the purpose of design, purchasing and installation of a playground equipment. That way it doesn't have to be spent, and seeding it on the low side, as Keith is suggesting, so that we can actually do it in a more organized and methodical way.
but then I'm also hearing that it's in pretty rough shape. So I don't know if we can.
That's why you
last
throw
another
that
2 or
word
3 years.
repair in there as well, so if Gail says, I gotta go replace this $3,000 swing, you take it out.
And the other thing we could also figure out is how much of the maintenance, that might be able to, we could probably spend from the maintenance fund on that, Keith. Because the maintenance trust fund for the school covers school grounds as well. So we can spend,
If it's repair versus.
if it's repair
structure.
versus
Do you
construction.
have many kids that get injured out there?
Yeah.
Let's hope.
We have children that get injuries out there, but no major.
Not directly
So we're
from a
as a
particular
result
piece
of
of
the
equipment, no
following-
repetitive thing,
Not yet.
nothing like that.
John Stokey inspects it on a regular basis, tightens things and sands things, and is holding it together.
And I guess the purpose of what I'm talking about in regards to the playground is basically, who do you want to drive the determining the estimate for the playground? Because if we're asking Gail to do it, then that's the school board saying, we'll figure it out. If it's a playground subcommittee, that's a different story and a different timeline. I'm worried about the timeline right now as far as what the school board's asking for versus what we're asking Gail to do. Because Gail can come up with the estimate for what some things are gonna cost. I think Kevin's using the example of Bartlett, I think that's actually a really good place to start, see what they got for $25,000, and if that's something that meets our needs. But if we want specifics on things, I just see some complications with that as far as who's driving that bus. Is it the school board? Is it the playground subcommittee? Is it the facility committee?
They did some work already, I mean, they
Well,
have.
as Mike said, it was 3 years ago.
Yeah, and we didn't, we had one in-person meeting for 40 minutes.
And we did a workshop with the kids and had them draw pictures and tell us what they wanted in there.
So why don't we
Can I
plan?
ask one more question on that? Let's say we did the capital reserve fund, and we also had a community push for fundraising. Those funds that are collected, can those go into that fund, or that has to stay separate?
The privately raised,
Yeah,
that goes into a separate account,
total separate.
goes into an activity account.
Yeah.
So,
I think we need to work something.
we'll leave this on here,
Yes.
Yeah.
and then we'll do a little bit of research. We say this, but Gail will do a little bit of research on it.
And here's one more question for you. You said you think we can fix it out of the maintenance trust fund, but we can't purchase one out of the maintenance trust
Just be on
fund? Is that
fixed.
correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Keith's point is, if there's something about this that needs to be fixed right now,
Yes.
can we do it? And the answer is yes, we
Continue
can.
doing that.
So we could use it for, no, well, I got a two-step question. So you said that we could use maintenance trust fund money to fix playground equipment.
Yes.
Can we use maintenance trust fund money to purchase equipment?
No.
No.
And those are actually the good questions for the trustees of the trust fund.
Yeah.
That's what their job is to figure that kind of stuff out. And I just think that, as part of the work session, it would be good to look at, we've got the numbers for the building expansion and what that encompasses. It also includes money for building security. And I did leave that out before, so it's classroom expansion, it's storage expansion, and it's building security as well. That's something that's itemized out in a kind of clear, concise way. And there's no reason at all we can't continue with the playground discussion and planning. Gail's a good start. I think that if we can, as a board, kind of take a look at what Bartlett did for $25,000, that would give us a good estimate there. And include that in the work session that we have about the facility in general.
Yeah, I think we need to really get into it, just so that we're prepared, and what we're doing, and we've revisited everything. And we need to bring Keith back in, stuff like that, so I think.
I just didn't want to toss the playground aside from the building expansion in general. I think that everything needs to be encompassed together as well.
Yes.
In one
Well,
conversation.
yeah, we have to have a plan. A long-term plan, okay. So we'll make a date for that as well.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yep, so in January, you'll see all this information again, and again, and again. And if there are any, at that meeting, really, the conversation should be about adopting the budget, modifying however we choose to, up or down, and then begin to really get the feel for the warrant and what articles are on there.
Were there any other fund balances that are not listed on these, besides the maintenance trust fund?
Trying to give you special ed, school bus maintenance, tuition, in Whitney Center maintenance. That's it. 5.
All right, superintendent report?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. Obviously, budget time is hitting our office pretty hard. The principal advertisement has been out and about in flyers and kind of working. We do have a couple of interested candidates at this point. Good news. And we'll continue to move that forward. Here's a copy of the calendar for 23-24. I think there are copies out there as well. That was adopted by the SAU 9 school board last week or the week before. And the last thing I will talk about is I know that you have the high school options committee that met, and members can speak to that. But the Kennet High School Tuition Study Committee, so you have 2 different parallel committees working. One is with all the 8 towns out there, Conway, as well as, Tamworth, Freedom, Madison, Bartlett, and Eden and Albany. And they've been meeting a number of times. So they said no to the cooperative study and then it was the joint maintenance agreement that was discussed, and that was put down. So now, the conversations are really focusing on the tuition contracts. So one of the school board members from Albany, Chair Tim Sorgi, is going to send out a email to all the different school boards, excluding Conway, so that the 7 other towns can meet and talk about negotiations for the high school. So I got an email from him today. He'll be reaching out right after the holidays, so probably you, Jen, and then you can distribute that however you like. And that is really all I have at this point.
I was going to tell you about the $83,000 grant that John Stokey got for that.
That's awesome. Stokey.
Yes. And
That's
they did a great job. As you know, we had the New Hampshire Homeland Security came and did a tour of the building, made some recommendations, so he used that information in the grant to request funds from the state, which I assume came from the federal government as well.
We get the notification today.
Yeah, nice.
That's fabulous. Anything else?
No.
All right. Policy committee. There was a meeting. I missed it. This was this morning, I believe. So we tabled off the Jackson policy until next time. Personnel committee. We met. We went over the job description for the principal. I don't know if there's any other.
There are just some minor revisions to a couple of the other policies, clean those up, updated the salary schedules and those type of things.
Facility and transportation committee.
Covered facility.
This is the bus, we gotta park that bus. And we gotta bring the bus back.
Yeah, I think it's already done, right?
Yeah. I don't know if they made about that.
Yeah, so the, where we parked our spare bus before is no longer an option, so we had to find a place for our spare bus to go. And it's being parked up by the town garage.
Nice.
For now. It was the kind of thing that worked out really well before. It's where it was parked before, was where the maintenance on our buses is done. So when we had a maintenance problem with one of the current buses, we would drive it there and then drive the spare bus away. And one of the reasons why this is an issue we should just be aware of anyway, because Keith asked me when we were talking about this, do we have a need for a spare bus still? And in talking to Jim about it, it seemed that we very much have a need for a spare bus these days because when parts break down, they're very difficult to come by. And they break down a lot, and we've been using our spare bus a lot. Last year, I think we actually had to borrow Conway's spare bus at one point in time. Conway had to borrow ours, I think, the year before, and so there does seem to be a need for a spare bus at this point in time. Anyway, so it's not as logistically good anymore having it in the town garage, but it's their best option at the moment. So. A little more work for the school bus drivers to hurry stuff around. So.
Okay, high school options committee. Darlene's not here. And Keith, I don't know if you can give an update on it, but I would like.
I don't think anything changed since the last meeting.
Well, I just want to thank Jessica for her input in her letter to clarify the situation. It was an excellent letter. Thank you very much for sending that. I think if you were at the last meeting in person, probably not that, it would have been fine. It would have been straight on, so I appreciate your letter to clarify some things. I know I worked with Darlene to clarify as well. But I don't know if we want to take a few minutes to talk.
I don't think I saw that letter. Was it a new letter since the last meeting?
Yes, it was in today. It's fine.
I have not one. I finally talked to Jackie today. They were sending all my emails to an email address I don't have. There's a U9 one.
Okay.
I haven't got any of I haven't got 0 emails.
Okay. So, I know it's not citizen comment time, but you're on the committee, and I would like to see if you would like to say anything, or...
Well, as one thing
both Jen and Jerry for responding. I got your message just before I came in. Jerry, thank you for well, today. I appreciate both of you responding to me. The letter was lengthy, so I think I said everything I felt I needed to say. I did feel that it seemed to be a messy meeting, and I felt badly about that because it was a lot of confusion. So I felt like I needed to clarify a number of things. And Mike, hopefully you were able to get it. Okay.
Yep.
Keith, if there's another email, I'm happy to send it to her and print out a copy of it. But basically, what I
I got your email before, didn't get that one.
yeah,
I got some a month ago.
So Keith, that was sent to our SAU 9 emails, which I don't know.
Oh, I don't get
I don't know if you have one of those.
No.
Yeah. So those are new too.
The same one you were using before for me.
yeah, I'll try. I'll resend what I did here today. But basically, I just wanted to do what I could to clarify my understanding of what has happened and get everyone on the same page from my vantage point. And I did want to be very clear that it was a letter from me alone. I had talked to Darlene ahead of time. She wished to keep going. She had already spoken with you. She felt that things were where, that she was comfortable where they were. So, and I purposely did not include other members of the committee because I didn't want anything to get messy.
Thank you.
You know, so but of course I would be happy to share with everyone because it was, it's my understanding of where things have been. And so, and I did copy Kevin on it, so he is, I assume you read it as well.
Yeah, it'll be forwarded in the minutes of the next meeting because it was.
Yeah, so it, you know, obviously.
Nothing wrong with it. I thought it was well written. Well done.
Good, dot my eyes, cross my teeth. But basically, I just had shared my understanding of what has happened thus far. So basically, what our original charge had been, tried to refer to both the agenda and the minutes from the beginning and what our understanding had been, and then, you know, just highlighted a few key points and basically just asked the board, you know, what I took from that meeting. And it was an enjoyable couple of movie nights for me because I had watched that meeting about 5 times to kind of get the point of what I was trying to understand. You know, basically, it was my understanding after that meeting that the board was not on the same page as far as what they wanted from us and what our purpose was meant to be at this point. Although I felt we had clarity, but we're in support of them. So aside from lacking a unity and purpose, there was also some confusion about our process. So I asked the board to please, as one body, get some clarity for us. And on top of that, one of my concerns has been that and I think it's because it's a small town, there are times when there's a quorum, when they wouldn't necessarily intend it to happen. And I think because this is such a sensitive topic, I've asked the board to please be extra sensitive to that because it's important that the business is conducted in the open with a record and everyone available to hear what's happening. And also, I think the other concern I had was that we've gotten some direction as a committee from individual board members, and that's always concerning because the board is one body. So, but both Dan and Jerry were very gracious, and you know, the letter is available to anyone who wants it, and hopefully we'll move forward.
I think the letter just reiterates clearly what the original intent was, what our intent was to all along. So the source for information, you know, I'm happy with as long as we're all on the same page to where people are getting their source was for the schools, the intent. And if you, as a committee, need any help, ask, I feel comfortable with this, or should we do this? We're right here. I think it's a really important committee for the community's sake as well, in educating the community on why we're doing this, what's come about. So the listening posts out to the community and what we're even doing. So some people still are in the dark, believe it or not. I know.
And that's what I think it was kind of a communication breakdown. I think that we were all on the same page, we just didn't know it. And that was my problem at the last subcommittee that day, is that just wasn't communicating well with everyone at the time. And that's why I really enjoyed the clarity that you provided in the email, because what you stated as the main question and then the objectives of the subcommittee are exactly what I thought the subcommittee was supposed to be doing. I think that the work you've been doing has been very good. Process-wise, I think it's rolling along fine. I would say that it's not just a help you need from us, it's that if you feel as though you need some other authorization to do work inside the scope of what the subcommittee is for, let us know, and we'll do that. Or if some other people should be taking on different kinds of tasks outside the scope of the subcommittee, then that would be good as well. Because the discussions that have to do with the high school tuition with Conway, to me, are completely outside of that high school options committee. It's just more work needs to be done independently. It doesn't have to be done independently, it's just its work belongs, and it was independent of what the work that your committee does. So.
Right, yeah, I mean, and I think just at this point, as far as one member of the committee, it would just be good to either affirm what you, if you all would affirm, and for Keith, I feel bad that you didn't see it, because I definitely, you know, I heard what you had to say at that meeting. You know, obviously I'm a fairly earnest person, so I take what you all have to say seriously, and obviously process is very important to me. So I would, it would be important, I think, to the committee that if there are issues, we want to know them now. I mean, every meeting of those committee meetings, we want to know, okay, what can we change? How can we improve this? What can we do? I'm not the chair, Darlene's the chair, so this really has to go to her. I'm but one person, but that's the only thing that I would ask the board, is to just make sure you all are definitely on one page, and if this is the direction you want, because the truth is, I think, the one thing I think I can speak for all of us on is that we're all very busy, and we all are doing this because we think it is an important job for you all. But if you don't want us to do it, if you want to just put out an RFP to the schools or whoever, I will gladly take that time out that we're spending each month. I know it myself, so just say the word, you know, and there will be no hard feelings. So
My only concern was making sure, and I spoke with Darlene about it, is that the members of the committee are active. And if you need help, like with talking to members, that, you know, it's,
yeah,
you can't just show up to the meetings, you're doing work to show up to the meetings with the work. So, and so if you need any support with that, I'd be happy to help or figure it out with the organization, you know, with the committee. Because you really need to be, it's an ongoing, right? Like, you're generating work, it's not work sessions, you're coming there to actually get.
And my take on that is that that's outside of the process that you're
Yeah.
currently involved in. And I have no comment towards that at all. I mean, it's inside baseball stuff. And if the committee's happy with the process you're following, I'm happy with that as well. I mean,
But there's a question, what I'm hearing Jess ask for from the committee.
For clarification.
For clarification, so I feel like
We're saying that the letter that you wrote has the purpose, and, you know, what we're looking for, and we're in agreement with that is what.
Great, can we, is that something that we can do?
We don't need to vote on.
Or but we can like,
I think we wanted to change.
I still have no idea
Yeah.
what the committee's.
I know, that's what I.
So,
Well, it's a shame that
Keith,
you're already in, like, it's already left the station.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I just didn't know if
I'm
there's,
just saying,
So you're
I'll
kind of
see.
along for the ride.
Yeah.
So Keith, to me, I'll hit the,
buckle up.
In my one meeting, I was very confused on what we was listening to, so I'm really looking forward to reading.
So read Jessica's email, because it's the thing that tells you
Yeah.
what the committee's
but I think
doing.
so that we can leave here, not so no one's confused. I'll
Yeah.
read
Least the purpose.
just the question and the objectives that Jess laid out, because that to me, that was my confusion before. I thought the committee was doing something other than what's stated here. So the committee can, like, to me, is that what the committee is doing is exactly this, and I'm happy the process that they choose to do that. I'm also happy with it, the process that was good, so I don't need to see any changes as far as direction given to that subcommittee as a board member, but at any rate, as she poses, the essential question is, what is the best option for Jackson students for high school? Objectives: the committee will understand the current high school tuition contract, including important decision-making timeline. The committee will engage the community for feedback on high school programming. The committee will investigate high school options, including tuition contract possibilities to include Kennett High School as well as alternatives. That's it.
So we're not trying to find out how many AP classes are, do they have, what sports do they have?
Well, that might be part of that
That might be
process, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a whole Excel spreadsheet that's amazing,
Yeah.
that has all of these questions on transportation, sports,
Yep.
AP stuff, I mean, all of that is on this.
So my hang-up before is mostly kind of semantics, is what does the word recommendations apply to? And I thought if the subcommittee was going to come back and recommend that we choose Kennett High School as the option, the best option for us, that might be heading down the wrong path versus here is the options of, you know, that are viable to us, maybe with recommendations on which ones are the most viable versus which ones aren't quite as viable. But in other words, I wasn't looking for the subcommittee to come back to us and say, you guys should send your kids here more, and here is the viable options for you. Again, maybe with recommendations saying which ones are more viable than others with the data behind it to support that. So to support that kind of recommendation or to support the viability of different options, you would of course need lots of data and lots of process points to reflect on and say, this is why we consider this a viable option, and this is what we don't consider viable about this option, and that sort of thing. So, I would certainly expect to see that. That's why the process I'm going forward was I'm perfectly content with. It's just what does the recommendation coming back to us look like? And what's the
Maybe we
objective?
can just change that language so that it's the high school options committee to create, to present the, I mean, if, I hear that you got tripped on the semantics of it, just so that we're all clear that they're coming back with the options, right? Like that's the key of it. So, I mean, I just want to help, if we're not having a vote on it, which is,
I think we're
totally
good.
understood. So we're in a good space,
I
so
think we're,
that was done really well, and we're clear on that.
Yeah, no,
Right.
we're good. I think we've been heard and heard, so I think we're.
Well, I'm not so sure about that.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking around the room and it seems like I'm not the only committee member who has carved this time out as part of my month to come down. We're all committed. We all, the people in this room have kids who are directly affected by the decisions of the school board and the community around us. And so what I'm waiting to hear is an affirmation from the Jackson School Board that the work of the committee is important to them, that the findings of the committee are important to them as they try to present their decision and their recommendation to the community as 30% of the school budget for the year. And some clarity that because that work is important, that the school board will support the committee in doing its work. And those things were missing from both our working meeting last month, and the school board meeting that followed it. And so I appreciate that you've heard from Jess, but what I as a community member and as a member of the committee would like to hear from you is an affirmation that we can do our work and that we can present our work to you and that we can present work that will be useful to you as you present a large budget line to the community and justify that budget line with some facts about why the community should spend $990,000 on contracted education in the upcoming budget.
And I guess the only one thing that I'd have to say to the committee, not being here when informed and stuff, is my personal opinion is maybe we've had too many options. I doubt I'm going to be on this board when it comes time to make that vote. I don't know who will be here. But I can tell you right now, if I'm on this board and Gorham's $1 a year for our kids and they have the best school ever, I'm probably still voting no, because I don't want to send our kids through that notch every day on a bus. If the charter school's $1 a year for a kid and the best education ever, probably voting no, because I don't know how that would be for a high school experience for our kids to not even have other kids.
So Keith, I think that's.
So I don't know if we need to narrow that, do we want to be that broad?
Well, so here's what I think we do, and that hopefully the question before us, and that is, there's lots of layers to this, okay? And there's probably, so to me, the essential point is what are our viable options, okay? And so what process are we going to use in order to determine our viable options? What I might think is an important step in those might be different than yours, might be different than Jess's. But back to Dr. Frazier's point about what's the purpose of this committee and is it important? It is. You're not going to be able to answer all the questions at all. Because contracts are going to be different. If we send our kids to Gorham, it's going to be a different contract than it would be for Conway. So you're not going to be able to tell us or give us an estimate on what are those costs going to be. What you can give us more is a general picture of what education might look like in the options that you're considering. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you're looking at Woodlands Academy, Gorham, Freiburg Academy, and Kent High School as your choice.
I don't have to justify the options and explain the options, Jerry. I think you do when you bring the budget to the town.
Right, but
And that's my point. The point I'm making is that at the end of this road for all of us is proving to the people of Jackson that it's worth approving the budget. And if you don't have the work of committee members who are also community members, and if you don't have data that you talked about, like AP classes and things like that, I'm not sure how you're going to persuade the taxpayers of Jackson.
And I agree. And that's why, to me, we need to keep the scope of what you're doing broad and allow you to do the work. And I would say, from my perspective, I fully support what you're doing, and I think it's very important. And you're not going to be able to answer all of the questions in the process you're doing by May 23rd. If we gave you another year, maybe you could, but that might just make the situation more confusing to me. And that's why, again, I appreciate the way Jess kind of condensed it back into what your purpose was and what your objectives were. And that to me is like, I believe you're looking at 4 different options for us, is that correct?
5, wasn't, the other one was a choice.
There's.
Oh, vouchers as
Yeah,
well.
vouchers,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, and right now it's Gorham, Freiburg, Robert Frost, and Kent, basically.
Mhm.
You know, I think we started wider, and
Right,
as
good.
information has come in, things just didn't make sense for certain things. So that's where we are. That was where we were at the last meeting that we held.
And incidentally, that's the same cohort of schools that was looked at when the first contract was signed 20 years ago, with the exception of Robert Frost. Right?
And the vouchers.
So not a lot has changed in the last 20 years.
Except for the parameter, I mean, the very reason for this is that we have to have an educated process to go through it. I mean, I'm with Jerry, I fully support that this is happening and the level of detail, and like, yes, absolutely, sitting in a board member's seat, I would say that we need this work to be done, and we need it to be done well and with authority and with generosity, right? Because that's how this is gonna happen, because we're not teeing up to this work, we're saying, can you guys put your hard-earned time into this so that we can make a good decision, so that we can go to taxpayers and say, this was not just like, well, we had a gut feeling that we should just stick it at this place. It's like, no, that this is an empirical, I mean, you know, we talked about it in some ways about like a smaller program, but the way the enrichment program was presented, right? It's like, here are the options, here are the pros, here are the cons, what does the board want to do with that? And there's a recommendation in it, but it's also like inside of the whole concert of information. So absolutely, I think that that's incredibly important to do, and I'm 100% in support of it.
And the other reason we asked the committee to do it as opposed to the school board doing it is because I felt it was very important that the community get more involved in in the education process as to why we're doing this and what are our options. So putting it back out to the community and getting community members to do the work so that you're talking to friends who are also talking to friends out there. I mean, that is invaluable to what this process is. You know, 20 years ago, I don't think many of us were here, except for Jerry, who's been here forever. But we came into the community like 2 days after the vote, and what was going on, and it was a big hullabaloo. And so one of my goals was to make sure that the community was educated as to the history of what happened, what's presented for us now, and what decisions do we have, like the information that you guys are gathering, in hopes of that you're reaching out to your friends to gather and talking amongst yourselves, like, so that there's more community involvement as to what's going on, so that we have the listening posts, we have that information, and then when it's presented to us, there's a community here, and citizens are here, and they're watching as well, so that we can make an educated decision as to what's going on. So we all know why we're making this decision.
And to me, it's your filling in probably one of the most important parts of the puzzle that we're going to have to put together. So my major concern was that my impression from the subcommittee meeting was that your committee was going to come back and recommend you should send our kids to Kennett High School, or you should send our kids to Freiburg Academy. And my concern with the work that you're doing, there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions, as in, how does it affect our bus schedule if we send our kids to Gorham? What does a contract look like with Gorham? Like, that's something this committee shouldn't be working on, in my opinion, and it's going to be unknown. But let's say that your committee comes up with the idea that, hey, Gorham is a very viable option and there's a lot of pros to it. You should look at it further. Because of that work, we'll be able to know now if Gorham's really viable. Or your committee might come up with the idea that Gorham's not very viable in comparison to Kennett High School and Freiburg Academy. So yes, it's viable, it would probably be an option, but not compared to Kennett and Freiburg. And so not any one committee is going to be able to answer all questions A to Z. You guys might be tackling questions A through N, and then we'll take it from there so that we can bring to the community, hey, we've done our homework. This is what this looks like. So when someone stands up in the meeting when we asked them to approve a 20-year contract with School X, it's going to be, hey, yes, we did consider Gorham, or yes, we did consider Jack Frost, and these were the reasons why we did it. It just was good and good and good, but these things made it not viable. So you can't answer the questions for all of them, but you'll be able to answer a lot of them, and that's why it's important, because school board can't do it by ourselves. We do need subcommittees to tackle different aspects of this. Just like there's going to be another committee that's going to work on just negotiating with Conway as far as what a long-term contract with them may or may not look like. So.
I appreciate hearing that, and I presume that I can take away from the comments that I've heard that we won't have any more committee meetings canceled, we won't have any more community listening posts canceled, and that the community and the school board and the committee will continue to move together in step to answer these questions so that we're prepared for you to bring a budget to the community and to answer and to have a plan with where we're going to send our kids to high school.
Dr. Butcher, I would say that's exactly, I think, where we're at. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Just to,
Yes,
just to take that just one step further, I really just want to make sure I understand, because so my understanding is that we'll be going back to another committee meeting, and we actually had a pretty carefully laid out plan to introduce what we were doing to the community, where we were working sort of in one-on-one in small groups, and then that whole spreadsheet, those, as I referred to in my note to you all, were rough notes to organize us, because we felt that we all needed to understand the landscape before we ever went to the community in a broader sense. And the plan was that starting in January, that was really when we were going to kind of go public with listening notes, and we had a number of them planned. So there is some confusion on my end, because I did get information this week that that's changing. So which do we follow? Do we go back to the plans that we have in the committee, or are there new plans made?
I don't know what the plans were for, like, I don't know what the topics were of the listening post, so I can't say.
So we had
like what?
Based on the members of our committee and people that we talked to, we had plans to speak to alumni of Kennedy. We had plans to talk, we had a listening post plan, we had a survey that was planned that was going to go to the public, that we were going to both bring in person, physical copies, go to town meetings, things like that. So I'm wondering,
Was that just for Kennett?
All of those listening posts were for the community, the Jackson community.
So my understanding was the listening post was to specifically talk about Kennett, and there wasn't going to be a listening post for Berlin, or a listening post for Gorham, or a listening post for anything else.
Well, there were multiple planned events. So there was a community-wide listening post that we were planning for just a general Jackson listening post, much like we've done many times.
Yep.
That was, hey, everybody come, we're going to do one during the week, we'll do one on the weekend. That was a suggestion by one of our committee members, because she said that's the best way to get everybody, offer childcare. If we can offer food, we're going to do that.
Yep.
That was just everyone. We were going to do a survey that was going to go out both digitally and in a hard copy, so that if folks had challenges with communication devices, we made sure that we could get them to fill them out. Short survey, we brought in a person who's an expert on surveys, 10 questions or less. Really tried to limit those questions to get to the crux of what we needed. That actually was still information. We had folks that were working on that. And then we had someone who was coming in to talk to current families and alumni of Kennett. And the reason we targeted that was because that's our school. Those are our families. Those are our people. So it's not that we don't care about Freiburg families or Berlin families, but Jack Kennedy is our community, so we want to know how's that going. So, and that's not to say, folks, and I heard your concerns about that in the meeting, obviously. Because it's an evolutionary process, if you feel that we need to talk to more people, I can tell you, we're not afraid of the hard work. We're happy to listen to more people, but we felt that the Kennedy community was important for us to hear from, because Jackson, those are our families, those are our alumni, those are the people that are living in our town. So we felt that was really important.
I guess, so I assume, I think that was mostly me, that I was just more concerned about making sure we're comparing apples to apples. So if we're just hearing from Kennett, but we're not hearing from any other school, you know, you can take what you want and manipulate the information. Say, you know, most of the community is against Kennett, but we didn't talk to anybody from Freiburg. So that's where I was coming from.
Right.
But I would trust in the process.
Yeah, and that's the only thing I'll say
Okay,
is,
so I'm
yeah,
okay with that.
Yeah. And what I can tell you is we're hearing a lot of wonderful things. Don't let, about Kennett and about, we're hearing wonderful things about Freiburg, we're hearing wonderful things about a lot of the schools. So, and I can tell you, we've already gotten lots of criticism from people because they said, oh, well, the committee isn't diverse enough. Let me tell you something, it's a very diverse committee. We have already had, we have had folks who have said, we should only look at public school options, we should only look at private school options, we should only do this, we should only do that. We've already, every meeting is a challenge to say, okay, we have one task. That was why I felt very comfortable saying to you, hey, I know what we're doing, because every meeting we have to center ourselves and say, we're a very tiny little committee, we have one job, we're supporting a bigger effort. And we're really just trying to get good information and we're also very aware of the fact that this is a highly charged issue and that you have a very hard job, because whatever information we give you, you still have to make that decision. And whatever decision you will make, people are going to be mad at you. So we're just trying to do whatever we can to make it as easy as possible. And so we're hearing things that are very opinionated and very biased. I'm trying to get rid of that stuff.
And I think that.
So I appreciate that.
When you're saying that you're being as transparent as you could, I really think that you are. And you're not going to satisfy everyone along the way, myself included. And I think that, you know, this is the informational gathering point, the fact-finding point, and that's the most important part of this. And you need to do that as unbiased as you possibly can. And people from working the outside in are going to try to put their own bias on that. And this isn't the right time for that. We will be making arguments as a community as to where we want to send our kids. And that's going to be the time for me to say, this is what I believe, and I don't care what you guys said. I'm going to think this way anyway, and here's why. I'll be making a strong argument for what I believe we should be making our kids do. But that's why it's really important to have the work that you do, the unbiased work, saying, here's the information, here's the tools you need to make this decision, to make these arguments, and have this debate in an intelligent way. And that's why it's so important, because we will have a hard debate about this. And you guys should be as insulated as you can from that. And as a board, I don't think we did a good job of doing that. And I think that moving forward, we just need to be, the board needs to be transparent about the communications that we're giving you, so that you guys can do the work the way you want to do it. If we want to change that along the way, then we should do it as a board.
As a board, okay. Thank you.
And we will try to do that as best that we can.
Thank you.
Carry forth, I entrust you. Thank you. I know, I really appreciate what you're doing. It's not easy.
And thanks for having the courage to come and tell us this, because it's the way we resolve problems. So thanks.
I had no doubt you couldn't tell. So thank you. That's why I wanted our committee. So thank you all. So I really appreciate all of your time and effort into the committee. It's not easy, and it's something new, so there's no template. So carry forth. Thank you. And I will keep attending them. So I've been to like 3 or 4 of the meetings, so. All right. Diversity,
Who's on the
equity.
committee though? It's you and Keith?
No, it's Darlene and Keith.
But
I was
if you
going
keep
because
attending, then
Kate
is
stepped
it
down,
down?
or Kate stepped down.
Totally.
So I had to step in.
I know, I'm just wondering that, but if Keith is on the committee and you keep going and Darlene's the chair, then we're in a quorum situation.
No,
No.
you can be a member of the
No,
public.
I can
Oh,
be a member
okay,
of just the audience,
that's
which is
cool.
what I've been.
What we can do is make decisions in the subcommittee meeting, and that's why that last subcommittee meeting,
Became
we didn't make any
Didn't
decision But we came dangerous, we
Yep.
crossed the line as far as
Yep.
where the discussion went that day.
Yep.
And I was probably more to blame than anybody for that.
And it wouldn't matter if there's a quorum, because the meetings are posted anyway, right?
It wouldn't matter from that standpoint, but it wouldn't be appropriate for the school board to make decisions in that instead.
No, I don't mean make decisions. I mean, legality wise, if it's posted and there's minutes taken, we're clear regardless.
It was a subcommittee, wasn't a meeting of the entire board.
Right.
That's the difference, right? So it's just not good practice to act as a full school board in a subcommittee.
And it's supposed to be just what does the public have an opportunity to see? You're posting a meeting for a subcommittee discussing this, and then there's a quorum there.
Yeah.
And now it's discussing things that affects the whole board. It doesn't give the community an opportunity to know that in advance, and they might participate in that meeting. Even if it's just sitting in the audience and observing, that's still participation. So that's why it's important.
Okay. DEI, we have the report in there. We're just looking at some different consultants and moving forward on the action expressed by the board. All good. There was something in it that intrigued me, and I can't remember it from the bottom of the page. It'll come back to me. Safety committee. Do we give you an estimate on the peepholes in the door?
What the, no, I will follow up on that again, yeah. I asked Jim about that, but.
Thank you very much, guys.
That's just.
And I wanted to
Thanks for
report,
supporting us,
the
Joe.
high school teachers were great the other day. My daughter tried to get in to the shop because her friend had a flat tire, and they wouldn't let her in. They made her go all the way around, and they quizzed her, and they gave her a whole bunch of, none of the students would let her in either, none of her friends, because they wanted to get a detention. So I was very happy with that. She's looking at me like, I'm like, no, that's what should happen.
That's exactly right.
Whitney Center? That's Darlene, right?
Yeah.
All right. Strategic plan?
The Whitney Center actually have something for that.
Oh, okay.
So my father's been taking up this effort to try to move the curtain or tapestry from the old town hall building and then install it here. It's something that all our town meetings we used to drop down behind the select board, and just been part of our history for a long time. So he's made an effort to try to move it from the old town hall into this building. So that effort's underway anyway.
And Warren's okay with this?
Warren's very much for it, yeah. But Warren's not the
President
anymore. That lady just wanted some clarification from the select board and from our board to give authorization for the whole thing anyway. So just a heads up that process is underway anyway. If it can be done, if it can be moved from there to here, I think that's what the plan is anyway. So
Nice.
Stokey's been pretty involved with it, and Gary Allen from the highway department has been trying to figure out how to make it happen. So it's underway.
Awesome. All right, strategic plan. I know we've had a rough month, so.
Well, that was an update.
That was an
last-
Budget the last meeting.
Right, so that was good, right?
We
It's on
haven't
here.
had any meetings.
I have just one more thing, board member issues. I would like to, wherever this would fit, to another thing, I would just like to ask the board to continue to work on inclusive language and moving away from a selectman concept to what Jerry just modeled by saying select board. So I really, all the work that the school has been doing on being inclusive with language, I think that we can model it in our school board meetings. So I will pipe up when people don't do it in as generous of a way, but let's move away from selectmen if we can.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Kick me under the table. Okay, next meeting Tuesday, it's on a Tuesday, January 17th. School district annual meeting is set for March 2nd, 7 PM. Budget hearing February 2nd, months away.
Jen, when do you think we're gonna do our frequently asked questions and get everybody?
I think we should do it, how about we do it the first week in January?
I think that'd be good.
And then bring it to the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Citizen comments?
I got one.
All right.
So I think you and I kind of maybe share this. We're both in industries where we're almost always searching for employees these days. And I've noticed that the board has accepted the resignation in the last 2 months of 4 very valued, long-time school employees. And I would guess that the total experience of those 4 employees is somewhere in the order of 100 years collectively. That's a lot of experience for JGS to lose and some very valuable employees. I didn't hear any mention in the Personnel Committee report about any discussion or action around retaining employees or around understanding reasons why we've had such attrition. Maybe we're in a rebuilding year like the Red Sox, but is that something that schools really do? So I'd like to ask the school board maybe to comment on that, but also perhaps as in whichever is the most appropriate committee to be able to make a report on efforts around both employee retention and employee recruitment, kind of on a more regular basis as we seem to be in this very tight labor market.
So I can address some of those things. You're correct, and unfortunately, you get to a certain point, right? And some people, you have a seasoned staff, and then all of a sudden, it happens in threes, right? All of a sudden, they leave. So we, in the past several years, the Personnel Committee has done excellent work as far as helping to acquire and attract people. We have a huge signing bonus, the biggest in the district, I believe. You know, we have a sub-housing committee out there looking for housing should someone come up. So I don't know.
We also changed all of our pay scale, right?
Yeah, we changed all our pay scale. So we've done everything we can to make us the most attractive in the community that we can. So we have all of that. I think there's even like a business like discount coupon thing going around as well for like new employees. So we're just not at the time to put out hiring necessarily, so we have to wait for that. As far as saying why people have left, that's an HR issue. You can't discuss why people are leaving. That's completely inappropriate, especially in a small community.
Sure, you can't say why an individual is leaving, but as an organization, when you have 40% of your full-time employees leave over the course of 2 months, I'm curious about whether that's come up in the meeting, whether there's been some conversation about why that might be, or if there's any way to do some soul searching as an organization to say, you know, what are the things that we can do to support our employees so that we can persuade ourselves and we can persuade the community that we're doing everything that we can to prevent attritions.
I think it's a great question to pose, because we should be thinking that way, and I can assure you we are engaged in thinking that way. It's more circumstantial than anything else that's created the situation that we're in, unavoidable by anything that we could have done. But as Jen and Mike had said, we've been very proactive in how to retain employees and then how to also get new employees over the last few years as we can, because we've been concerned about this type of thing and how it happens. And we've been very active in the last few years specifically because it's a crisis that the whole nation is in. I feel we're doing that, doing what we can to do that, and we're very conscious of the problem that you're posing. I would say I've been on this board a very, very long time, and years ago we were doing the exact same thing, even when there was no national crisis on this sort of thing. When you could buy a home in Jackson for $150,000, we were still very proactive in how do we make our school, how do we keep our employees? We wanted to do that not because it was hard to get new employees, but it was because the employees we had are really good for us and always have been. So we've always done everything we can to stay a step ahead of Conway or a step ahead of Bartlett and what they offer. Always with the idea of being as fair to the taxpayer as we can. Unfortunately, we live in a state that has some of the lowest pay for educators. And we live in an area in the state that is, again, low on that side. And the whole SAU 9 as a whole has always tried to stay above the averages as far as what we offer for pay and what we offer for benefits. And there's a lot to it. It's not just what salaries are, not just what starting salaries are. There's a lot to that whole package as a whole. And some of the examples that came up with recently is little things that we're doing to try to get what we can. But it's always been something that the Jackson school boards that I belong to have always been very, very conscious of. But it's helpful, again, to have people come and say, are you doing this? And I think we are.
Thanks.
I have different so last month, I think about 8 to 10 parents showed up to tell you, the school board, that there are concerns as parents about the experience for our kids at Jackson, and we were told a lot of things, I think, but you did say as a board, at least some of you did, that you would look into that. And I wanted to ask you what, as school board members, you have done to look into those concerns that parents brought.
So I met with the principal, but you can't really discuss anything specific. It's,
And did you reach out to any parents?
Again, that's not the right chain of command. So we had discussed in the school board, like, if parents needed to go to the teacher and then to the principal, and they're not satisfied, so I'm not supposed to know about personal
Jen,
cases.
can you clarify about that? Because I was able to find that policy statement, but it was a policy statement that was suggested by a trade group that exists in support of school boards. And so I was not able to find it as something that's been voted on by the school board as a policy.
I'm pretty sure we reviewed that one pretty recently, because we reviewed most of them. I don't know the the actual term, but I do know that it's supposed to go to the teacher, then to the principal, and then to the superintendent. It's not supposed to jump directly to the school board if there's an issue to go on, because we might need to go in and make a decision on it in a non-public session.
That was around personnel complaints, but what I heard at the meeting was more the community informing you of circumstances and a culture that existed at the schools. So I didn't hear so much complaints about individuals or HR issues.
No, I don't want
Did you
to.
hear that?
No, I did, yes, we kept it very professional that way.
So would that
And
policy
then,
apply
but my
to
conversation
those
with,
comments?
my conversation with Gail also cannot be specific.
Okay, and so then you
Right.
had a principal report that literally said nothing. You have asked us again and again as a community to show up. And last month we showed up, you told us to be quiet, and then you said that you would look into it and come back to us, and there was literally nothing in the agenda about that. Like, what are you saying to us as a parent community?
So one thing I can say is it's not appropriate for school, and it's hard in this town because we're a small town. It's not appropriate for individual school board members, whether they're the chair or not the chair, to talk to parents in regards to school business on any level. Now, obviously, as people and friends, we will do that. We see each other and things, but as far as specific complaints and stuff like that, it's really not appropriate for any school board member anywhere to talk to parents individually about specific school problems. It's just not something the school board should do. It's not our function. It's not our role, because we can't make decisions as individuals. We make decisions as a board. The majority of the board is what dictates our decisions. And that alone is the biggest reason why it's not appropriate for a school board member to talk to a parent. It is appropriate for the school board to assign a task, usually to the chair, to have a discussion with the people involved in something that we hear from the community. And that's what we did at the end of the last meeting, is that we had commissioned Jen to speak with Gail about the situation. And as far as the school board, sort of what we can report back out to the public, we can't say more than that.
As a school board member, have you had a group of parents come to you before and let you know of that level of cultural concern?
Not
And did
my
you
tenure.
create a plan, that hasn't been anything, like, to address those concerns? Whether it's a survey, engagement with the PTO, contact differently with the teachers, a community, anything? Did you make any plan?
I worked with Gail, and she assured me that she was working with teachers and asking for parents if they wanted to come forward, which you have, and that we've been doing everything that the policy states. So, I mean, it's really hard in a small community, but if parents don't come up. And then on the other hand, I heard from many of those parents and more that they were very happy and they didn't have an issue. So some of those parents that were here were not here to support. There was only a few. So I'm hoping that the parents that have issues are coming to the teachers and coming to the principal. And that's all I can say. I can't get into specifics. I have to trust that the process is working
And if it's not, then I need to hear it from the superintendent.
Kevin, were you able to find that policy document?
It is about personnel complaints, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's the one.
So.
But it would be very inappropriate for them to engage in student level, specific student level issues.
I didn't hear
It's not
any
our fault, it's
personnel
all we
named,
do.
and I didn't hear any students named, but I heard the board enunciate a policy despite that, and decline to hear a parent's comments. So I guess maybe, we don't have to get into this, but it sounds like maybe there's an opportunity here for some education of the board members about the policies that pertain to the board's interaction with the public. Would you say that that's true?
Oh, I think, to be really honest with you, I think this level of dialogue is inappropriate for a school board meeting. I said that after the last meeting. I was embarrassed for Gail. I thought it was totally out of bounds to have that level of conversation at a board meeting. You have 42 kids. You are talking about individual students in disabilities and other issues that I thought were totally inappropriate to be had.
I think
If you want to have those conversations, we can do it off record, but I'm not going to be talking about individual students in a small school like this, that it's very specific.
Kevin, with all due respect, you don't need to explain to me about confidentiality and how that works. And I did not hear any individual students talked about. I did not hear any individual teachers talked about. So I just think
Dr.
that,
Glazer, if I may, I think you're asking the board to do something that the board is not supposed to do. And I know that you don't like that answer, but that's the answer we're giving you, is that you're asking us to get involved in a situation that we're not supposed to get involved in. At the level that you're asking us to get involved in. There may be levels in which we would be involved in this situation. Those have not been presented to us yet. We can't react to a small group of parents that come in and say, we want you to do this. Okay, that's not how our board is supposed to operate.
I appreciate that, Jerry, and I can certainly understand why I might be giving that impression. And so I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. My perspective as an individual and as a parent, as a community member, is not to see kids, it's certainly not to see kids singled out and, ganged up on in public. It's not to see teachers and administrators ganged up on in public. But what I would like to see is that parents are bringing concerns forward to the school board. That the school board expresses concern and expresses an interest in hearing what the parents have to say. And that's really my hope, my expectation. Would you say that that is unreasonable?
The way that it was presented to us at the last meeting, I agree wholeheartedly with Kevin. That's not a conversation that should have happened here. Again, because my perception of it is a small group of parents came and asked us to react and respond and do something about an isolated situation, and that's not a level of management that this board has. It just isn't. It's not what we do. We're not supposed to be involved in that type of activity. Again, we have guidelines that we follow and policies that we follow. But you presented a situation to us that wasn't something that we were supposed to be involved in at that level. In other words, we try.
I don't think I presented a situation.
What we're trying to do is, no, you did not. I apologize, but others here did present specific situations and ask for specific things to happen. And we tried to explain to you that that's not the way the process works. The process works in this way. Again, I feel as though you're asking us to react to something that we can't react to.
But I wonder if there's an and with this, which is there might be something that we can't react to, but is this a question of saying, I as a school board member is what's happening with our school? And I think what you're asking for is the human response to be is there something going on? And then to turn to, as Jen said, the protocol of saying, hey, say, are we asking the superintendent and the principal to come back to us and give us a sense of like, hey, there's something going on here that we need to look at culturally. So Kevin and Gail, I mean, Kevin, you and I talked about this a little bit too. Is there, beyond what Jen just said, which is like we've asked and there's some, I'm not totally clear. I understand protocol, but I'm also like, is there a bigger conversation that's possible for us to be having that is not specific, but is more like, hey, do we need to have a pause, and is there a school board involvement, or just is there something we can ask you guys to report out to us, not about specifics, but just like, how's it going about this very issue? I mean, I know that there was a all-school meeting that was done recently. I think like that could be an interesting point of reference. So Kevin, kind of tagging on the conversation we had, is there anything that can come to light?
I mean, I've been here, I don't know, 2 decades.
Yeah.
And we've had this issue, and I think part of it is, you don't want to blame COVID, those types of things, but I give my full trust to the administration and the teachers that will, when the process is, or an issue is presented to them, that they have hundreds of years of experience with students, right? And these are the same teachers, they're not new. We have some of the same teachers that have been here through no complaints, now have situations arise where they have to deal with things that they are using their professional, they're doing everything in their professional to work with the parents and the students and by the policy and by the book and with Gail to right the ship as much as they can. So I think it's an opportunity, just, we have to trust in the process. It's worked for so long.
But I don't think that's
we can't get involved.
I'm not asking to get involved. I'm asking to say like, is like this question, and Kevin, I would ask you to jump in here, per the conversation that you and I had a couple weeks ago, like, I'm not trying to overstep. I'm trying to hear and to say like, we can say, let's trust the process, but I think that the question is like, do we need any more, do you need more support with the process? Like, is there anything else that's happening where we can have a bigger dialogue?
So can I offer my 2 cents here? So is this problem, I'm not asking for answers. Does this problem only happen when these problems only happen when people step on the school grounds? Or is this a problem that is happening in general and it just carries over to the school ground? And the reason I'm asking that is maybe this is also more a community issue. It shouldn't just all be thrown on the school board. Maybe it's I remember back when, we say things changed, like Jen said, 2 decades. I can remember back when my kids first started here, the Sunday before school started, everybody from the school would go to a family's house for a barbecue. That was just organized by the community. We would have Sunday soccer. And you would find almost everybody, every family from the school showing up at Sunday soccer. And I think that there's a deeper issue than what's happening between the walls of this school. And I just think that the community itself has changed and aren't as, for lack of a better word, tight as it used to be. And it shouldn't all be thrown back on the school board. This is a community thing.
And that very well may be and very well may not. But again, the ask that I heard from the group of parents that showed up at the last meeting isn't something the school board can do. Because I can't as an individual go to parent Jody Pettingale and say, hey, were you there that day? And what did you think of the situation? I can't do that.
Okay.
But Jerry, I'm not asking for that. I'm trying to take it to this next step, which is
I'm getting there.
Okay.
And so in a cultural sense, again, I've been on this board for a very long time. And I don't understand in that regard what you're asking the board to do. Is it to look at the culture of the building? It's what we do all of the time in the sense that we do it, in the way we manage the business affairs of the building, who we hire and who we fire, and those reasons. And that's why this conversation, to go beyond what was brought to us, is impossible for the board to react to do anything, because again, we have employees that we're in charge of hiring and firing. And there's parameters in which we have to do that as a whole board. So I can't as an individual go to Gail and say, hey, what happened in that situation? Can you explain it to me so that I can be satisfied? Because when we hear things, obviously we're going to be concerned and want to know what happened. If nothing else, just for curiosity's sake. And we can't react in that way as a board because we have to be fair to everyone in the school community. I guess what I don't understand is it seems to me that the bigger ask that you're asking of the board, I'm just saying, it's not our function, it's not what we do, it's not what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to do those things.
Well, I think that I'm getting a feeling of a little bit of, us versus them and defensiveness, and I understand that because, we're kind of like sitting in the room, not around a circle, we're sitting in a room, facing off, and I get that. But at the end of the day, to your point, Keith, we are all in this together. We're all in a tiny town together, we're all part of a tiny school together, we're part of a community. And so I don't know what the ask was a month ago, and I don't want to argue about that tonight, but I do want to clarify that my ask tonight is pretty simple, and it's pretty consistent too. So I brought up the thing about personnel, right? And in a lot of ways, my ask around the personnel issue is the same as my ask around the community issue that was brought up a month ago, which is to say, my ask is to be willing to listen and notice what's going on, to be curious about whether there's anything to learn about what's going on, and then to be willing to share a little bit with the community about what you're doing about what's going on. Because we're not here because we want to attack you. I didn't come out tonight and leave my kids at home with a babysitter because I wanted to yell at people. I want to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm on the committee.
And what I would say towards that is that I don't characterize what you're saying as being critical or being judgmental of us at all. I really don't. I just think that it's a misunderstanding about what our roles are versus what a parent in the community's role is. And it's hard when you're both. It's hard when you're both a community member and a school board member and what your roles are. As far as what happened in the last meeting is concerned, the right thing to do then, and it's not easy as this board, and I'm not blaming Jen for this at all, we're a board, and the chair is just one aspect of the board. That conversation should have been stopped and not allowed to have that night. And we have the authority as a board to do that. We can shut down conversation. The chair can't because that's not what our policy says. Our policy says that we allow for public comments. And there's some discretion as far as the chair can shut things down. But that night, we should have, as a board, stopped that conversation immediately and said it's not appropriate for the school board to have this conversation. It's not appropriate for public comments to have that conversation. So that's not a conversation that we should have heard that way, in my opinion. It's not the way that's supposed to work because I'm not a professional about how to manage kids' behavior problems. I'm not. And I don't need to be. I'm not. None of us are. That's not what we're here for. We're here to manage employees, and appropriate budgets. That's our basic function. The management of behaviors in the community, behaviors in the school, child behavior, that is way beyond the scope of what I'm capable of or why I'm here. And that's ultimately why that conversation that night was not appropriate in this setting, because it's not what we're here for.
It was bad enough we had to deal with COVID.
And so not only should I not react, I can't. I mean, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do about it as an individual, and there's nothing that the school board can do to react to that situation. It's not what we do. There is a process for what we do, and we try to describe what that process is, and that's the best that we can do. But at no point, even from the people that were here very passionate, I didn't feel attacked by them, or that it was us against them. It was just...
you almost feel bad you can't do it.
And that's just it. And I don't think that this is something that spurs a general conversation on the school board to have work sessions or anything like that to discuss the general culture of a building, because this to me it's more isolated incidents that happen, and they happen through a process. Sometimes we're aware of those things, sometimes we're not. And there's reasons for that. Again, as I said that night, is because sometimes we have to be the judge and jury in situations like that. And that's why we're supposed to stay outside and above it for another reason.
Yeah, and I get a little bit personally too, Dr. Blair, please, but it's always in protection of individual students, right? I'm an adult, I get paid, that's okay, it comes with the territory. But if we get into any level of detail, you are identifying, okay? I'm just saying, if we say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we have trouble with a couple of kids in second grade. Or we have a staff member who is really melting down because they aren't used to working with certain behavior, whatever it happens to be. This community is so small that we have to be extremely careful, even for board members. Even for board members. You know, you have such a small population, and I will try and protect those interests, right? And you would want that as well. Because we all struggle, we have students who struggle in a lot of different areas. And we just need to be very careful about time, place, and manner. And I'm not sure a public forum in front of TV is the best place to have those conversations. Did I follow up with Yale? Absolutely. Is she putting some things in place for individual students, for grade levels, for class schools? Yes. Do you see all those pieces? Probably not. Is she going to say this intervention is taking place for X student or these students? But we can't share those things. And I get that. I do. But your concerns were heard. They were. There have been a number of actions and a number of pieces. But again, I would be very careful not to be so specific to say, this is what we're targeting or how we're doing it.
I would say,
That was helpful.
I've worked with Kevin a long time, I've worked with Gail a long time, I worked with Dr. Nelson a long time, I worked with Ann Kevler a long time. And there was times when the boards were made aware of situations, and there was for good reasons, and there was times when the boards were not made aware of situations for good reasons. And all along the way, I've trusted those people had the best interests of the school, the community, and the school board and parents at heart in the way they presented stuff, either to the board or not to the board, and how things got addressed. So,
Okay. Any other citizen comments? No, non-public? All right. Meeting adjourned? Motion?
Motion.
Second. Thank you.